all of those words about surrender and letting go. I am exactly where I need to be, exactly where I need to be. Can you relate to that? I was thinking about when she was singing that song, today we're going to talk about this journey as surrender, and I just had this image of when I was young being on my bicycle with training wheels. How many of you remember the training wheels? Or maybe you had a big wheel, or I think we're probably older than the big wheel generation. Maybe we had just lots of skin knees or whatever, but having those training wheels, and I'll never forget the day my dad took those off. And while I had to surrender, a whole new world opened up. Can you relate to that? And I don't know about you, but there's been a lot of training wheels that I've had to take off in my life and discover a new ability, something new that I had no idea before then that I could do on my own. And so that's where we are today in week 6. We've been in the midst of a fall study series that is based on this book by the Reverend Dr. Roger Teel, This Life is Joy. And we have focused on 7 spiritual pillars, as he calls them, spiritual ideas. We began the first week with this instant is love. And then this being is light. This world is consciousness. This idea is substance. And last week, this relationship is oneness. Now, in order to get all of those things, you really have to realize that we're talking about seeing with spiritual eyes. That to look at another and to say this being is light requires another way of seeing. And so today when we talk about the 6th idea, which is this journey is surrender. Now, interestingly enough, out of the entire 7 ideas, the pillars that he presents, there's really one, and this is the one, this journey is surrender. The other are more conceptual. They're concepts. It's a philosophy to comprehend a way of seeing life. Surrender is truly a way of living life. And when I think about this journey is surrender, I can't help but hear the wisdom of Kenny Rogers. You gotta know when to fold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run. You remember that? You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run. That's truly the life of surrender. I've shared this story many times, but I grew up in the Pentecostal church. And in that tradition, typically if you reached a point in your life that you wanted to turn your life over, you wanted to dedicate your life to God, to something bigger, then you walked down the aisle, you would kneel at an altar, and people came and they prayed around you, and it was you gave your life over to God, or being saved as it was called in that experience. Well, when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, I was in a service one Sunday and my heart was just pounding and I knew I was ready to do this. And so I walked down and I kneel, and the next thing I know, there's people all around me, and as soon as I kneel, I had this realization, I have no clue what to do next. I have no clue what to do next. And as I'm sitting here thinking, oh my Lord, what am I going to do? Am I going to get up? And then these people are around me, and I hear 2 people, and there's one person on one shoulder saying, hold on, Sister Darlene, just hold on, just hold on. And then there's another one over here saying, let go, honey, just let go, let go. And I remember thinking, which do I do? Do I hold on or do I let go? And I've come to realize that that's life. Do I hold on or do I let go? And I think you probably have already come to discover more than once that it's not an either or, that it's a both. In that we come to discover, what are we holding on to? What can we hold on to when we come to that ultimate surrender in life? That how do you hold on and try and give it your best and let go? 2 things that seem to be a paradox. They seem to be opposite, but really they're not. They're 2 things that work together beautifully when we learn to see that this being is light and this world is consciousness, and that I'm spirit in expression. And so what does it really mean to say this journey is surrender? As I began to think about that this week, 2 things came to mind. I began to ask myself, what was my first experience with surrender? But there was something that preceded that 11-ish-year-old experience in the church. There was something that happened when I was about 6. I have a cousin, he actually just recently made his transition. His name is Daryl. And my mother and his mother are sisters. And so we were cousins. They were in the hospital at the same time giving birth to us. So 2 sisters having children at the same time. They were close, we were close. He was born about a day and a half prior to my birth. So we grew up, we played a lot together. We had a lot of memorable birthday parties and different things together. And I remember he was at my house one day, and again, we were probably around 6. We were playing something, and I won. I beat him. And I just remember having that little 6-year-old, na, I won. And he puffed up and said, well, I will always be older than you, a day and a half, mind you. I will always be older than you, and I will always be stronger than you. And I said something like, well, you may always be older, but you may not always be stronger. I could be stronger. At which time he began to chase me. At which time I found out he was indeed stronger. As I was quickly on the grass, face down, with my arm twisted behind my back, and he was saying, surrender. Surrender. Say, uncle, surrender. Say that I'm stronger than you. So I quickly surrendered. And then I learned that wrestling technique that I used on my little sister. And, and the headlocks and the arms behind the back. How many of you have had that experience or seen your kids? You know what that is. Well, that was an experience of surrender. And that was one of the first things I thought about. And then I thought about the scripture that we hear so often, and it's the words attributed to Jesus when he realizes his final destiny, and he says, Father, not my will, but thy will. Not my will, but thy will. And so our understanding of surrender can be that broad. It's that young understanding. It's force and win, or surrender and lose. There is that kind of a physical force. Surrender does have a meaning in that idea. But that's not what we're talking about when we say this journey is surrender. It's not about someone having power over you. It's about you being empowered from the inside out. Because life is going to happen. It's going to change. We've read and are all inspired by people who are imprisoned or come up against such incredible odds that seemingly hold them down. Have you ever had life wrestle you to the ground? Maybe not a person, but I've had life wrestle me to the ground more than once when I reached a point of what I was doing no longer worked, of having to let go, but in the letting go, coming to discover something inside of me. So it's not a giving up, it's the giving over. That's really what spiritual surrender is all about. And so when we talk about spiritual surrender, Ernest Holmes said, making the great surrender to spirit does not mean losing anything worthwhile, but getting rid of the things which deny the presence and power of spirit. That's the place we're going with surrender. It's surrendering yourself so that you can get yourself out of the way. It's surrendering so you can get past yourself, past your limitations that you may be running into at the time. Now, to really understand surrender, I think it's important to think about the difference in quitting and surrender. And Elizabeth Gilbert wrote something beautiful in a blog about this that I just thought was very powerful. She said, the difference between quitting and surrender. Quitting is when you just plain give up. Something is hard, is boring, you're sick of it, you simply don't feel like doing it anymore. Quitting is what I do every time I go to the gym, when I promise myself that I will stay for an hour. And after 15 minutes on the treadmill, I'm like, yeah, well, that's basically good enough. And then I go and get myself some ice cream as a reward afterwards. And I tell myself some lie about how diligent I am. Am I walking out of the gym because I have pushed myself to the limit, because I've reached the end of my power? Nah, I'm walking out of the gym because I don't feel like doing it today. That's quitting. Can you relate? And she says, in more serious terms, I have quit on relationships. I've quit on friendships because I didn't feel like doing the work to save it. I have reached points where it scared me, or I didn't want to have that difficult conversation. And so I quit. I've never been proud of myself for anything that I've ever quit, because quitting is just a story that you make up trying to convince yourself you've done all that you have when you secretly know that you have not. Quitting is giving up on yourself. It's a kind of self-betrayal, and sometimes it's a kind of self-hatred. You sabotage yourself and the greater life presence every time you quit. But surrender is something entirely different. Surrender is what happens when you come to the end of your own power. Isn't that beautiful? Surrender is what happens when you come to the end of your own power. Surrender is what happens when you have searched to the bottom of your soul and found out this truth, which is you really can't do that thing anymore. Surrender is what happens when you don't have any more ideas for how to fix everything. Surrender is what happens when none of your survival strategies work anymore, when your playbook is out of pages. Surrender is what happens when you can turn it over to God. You release your grip on things, you stop white-knuckling it. You stop pretending things are great when they're actually horrible. You stop putting on a fake face, glossing over the problem, lying to yourself or lying to others. You face the truth that you are not the most powerful power on the universe. You turn it over to the universe, to God. You exhale and you let go. There's always grace in surrender. There's always truth in surrender. There's always a great deal of human dignity in surrender. And what happens next is often very beautiful. You crack open because you have stopped fighting and pretending. And once you do that, anything whatsoever can now occur. The universe can sometimes only really work through you once you have surrendered. And so I love that. Surrender happens when you come to the end of your power, and I would say, and you free yourself to expand. That if you have not, and if we are still not reaching a point of, I don't know how to get beyond this, then I don't think we're playing life full out. I think if we're trying to control it all and we think we know how it works and we stay within this, then it's just a huge illusion. And in one way, we're quitting on ourselves. We're quitting on believing it's like what Eric Butterworth, when he said, we're human in expression, divine in creation, but limitless in potentiality. That we are always bumping up against things. We don't know how to get beyond this. Our country is facing a huge one. Next week, this time, we will have a new president. Approximately half of the country is going to be relieved. Approximately half of the country is going to be outraged. And there's something happening here that I think we're really realizing the hard way that there are easier ways, that when we reach this degree of divisiveness, this degree of separation, then there has to be something, a better option, a bigger option. When it comes down to a lose-lose, it's time to enter another level of playing. Would you say yes, amen? And so in our life, this week I ask you to really begin to think about that. Has it gotten safe? Has it gotten comfortable? Because if it has, it's just an illusion. And begin to pay attention. It's like, where is your soul pecking? Where is it saying, it's time for you to go to the edge of your own being so that you may open up to your greater becoming? That's what surrender is about. Anyone in a 12-step program has come to discover the power of saying, I can't do this. I surrender. But I'm not giving up in the realization that I can't do this. I'm saying that my earthbound physical self, that I own, my intellect, I can't do this. And there is a presence and a power that is a part of me, and it knows how to keep me safe. It knows how to keep me walking in the direction that is in my highest and best interest. That's what it means by this beautiful power of surrender, to realize that it's coming to discover more of you than you knew yourself to be. It's taking the training wheels off. You know, sometimes the training wheels protect us. Sometimes the training wheels keep us from being able to take the curves in life the way we need to take them. And so there's a reason that we need to be able to keep moving forward, continually taking off the training wheels, so to speak. In Buddhism, if you've studied Buddhism, the idea of clinging and letting go are really central ideas to Buddhism. I like the word letting go better than surrender because my cousin Daryl held my arm behind my back and I had to say, I surrender. And then I did that to my little sister, God bless my soul and her soul, that has that connotation for me. But when I think about letting go, it's empowering. Because letting go is, I feel myself gripping. And in the Buddhist tradition, you're always first and foremost focusing on your mind. And so are you aware when your mind obsesses and just holds on and chews on to the same old thing? Are you aware when your mind wants to be right? Rather than happy, it wants to be right. And when your mind is doing these things, then we're acting out in these ways. So in the Buddhist tradition, it's about observing and becoming aware. When do I need to stop grasping, stop clinging, stop resisting? How do I let go? And what is it exactly that I'm letting go of? You see, if you authentically surrender, if you really let go, there should always be a lightening. You should always feel a little bit, not a streak of lightning, there may be, but in the letting go, you should feel a sense of lightening up. I'm not saying that you won't have an onslaught of tears. I've had some letting goes when I just collapsed to the floor in a puddle. And still, there was something within me that felt lighter. There was a glimmer that I had reached that point of, I just can't do this anymore. And so in the true, genuine letting go, we realize it's a necessary step. It's something we absolutely need to do. But we let go and remain open. We don't let go and give up, because to let go and give up is to close a door. Authentic letting go and spiritual surrender is actually to open a greater door. It's to open another door of possibility. And that's where the miracles in life really begin to happen, when we do that kind of letting go. It's a very powerful place and thing to do. Roger Teel says, efforts energized and informed by surrender activate miracles. And I can attest to that being true. So one of the first things for us to understand in the letting go is it takes us back to the very beginning, that we are love and light and expression, that this being is light, that I am a being of light. Letting go is about coming to discover the fullness of all that we are as an expression of all that is. There's a beautiful reading by John Shore, and then I added to this, but he uses this incredible analogy to teach us who we really are. He says, imagine that you're a drop of water. You have thought of yourself as a drop all of your existence. You were born a drop and you grew up a drop. You went to Drop University. You worked at Drop Corporation. You married a fabulous drop and you now have 3 beautiful drop children. You went on holidays to Drop World every year and you lived an ordinary life as a drop of water. Then one day, you met a challenge that you, as a drop, could not overcome. You tried harder and harder and harder. But the harder you tried, the weaker you became. The more frustrated you became. It seemed an impossibility. Well, then one day you went to a workshop and you learned that you were not just a drop. You learned that you were actually part of something greater, something wonderful. You read drop spiritual books. You studied with many great drop spiritual teachers. You became aware that you were ocean, not just drop. Wow, all this time, who knew? I am one with the ocean. I am not just a drop. I am an expression of the great ocean. I am made of the great ocean. I live and have my being within the great ocean, and the great ocean forms me, fills me, and is everything that I am. The great ocean is my constitution. my essence, my home. Your whole life changes. I'm no longer just a drop capable of handling drop-sized problems. I have the whole ocean inside of me, behind me, and all around me. Wow, there really is an ocean of possibilities. I can relax a little. Instead of plodding and pushing my way through life as a little drop, I can now merge with this great ocean and bring forth more than I ever imagined. Doesn't that say it beautifully? That when we identify as this individual, clinging and holding on to the things we don't want to change, coming to believe that things are this way and they'll always be this way. Well, that's when we see ourselves as the drop. But life will never let us settle there. We're always being asked to open up to the greater realization of who we are. Because you can't talk about authentic surrender and not think about death. Because all of us are going to die. The purpose of life, we can clearly say, does not appear to be to live forever. The purpose of life is not to save your life because it's futile. We can't. Anyone that has some age on you, you have surrendered many times. Things and capabilities you used to have, you don't have anymore. If you've got some age on you, there's really no body part in its original starting position. Everything has changed. and that every time we look, we realize we're changing. That's life. And so life is not about trying to save our life. That's why the scriptures say to die before you die. It's coming to the realization that life is about bringing forth all that we are beyond the context of this earth-bound life. Roger Teel shares a beautiful story about this when he talks about the President John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams, as you may or may not remember, was the 6th president. He lived to be 80 years old. And in his time, that was a person older in age. And when he was reaching I think he was close to 80 years old when this happened. He was becoming weak and feeble, and he was walking down the streets of Boston one day, and it says, he met an old friend on the streets of Boston. The friend shook his trembling hand and said, "Good morning, and how is John Quincy Adams today?" The ex-president replied, "John Quincy Adams himself is quite well, I thank you. But the house in which he lives at present is becoming quite dilapidated. It is tottering upon its foundation. Time and the seasons have nearly destroyed it. Its roof is pretty well worn out. Its walls are much shattered. It's trembling with every wind. The old tenement is becoming almost uninhabitable. And I think John Quincy Adams will have to move out of it soon. But he, sir, he himself is quite well. Is quite well. Isn't that powerful? It is well with my soul. It's really to know that, to realize that life, we can't save it. What we can do is savor it, and we can fully express it. Life is a journey of surrender. So how do we do this? If you figure it out, let me know. You hold on and you let go. So how do we do this? The way that I know how to do it is, first of all, it's to realize. It's to cultivate, it's just to work with the idea, do it this week. Work with the idea, the mantra, this journey is surrender, but empowered surrender. This journey is surrender. And begin to realize, begin to pay attention and to realize how you hold on, how you cling. It's the little things. It's when you're sitting at that red light and you are really irritated that it is red that long. It's learning the next step is to relax, to take that breath, that this life is surrender. I can't change this. It's beginning to notice in your conversations when you're having that feeling of like, yeah, but they don't quite get my point. They don't see it my way. I just got to keep trying. That perhaps it's just to back off a little bit. It's beginning to notice, what is your mind have you focused on that has you pushing and trying and swimming against the tide? Without judging, but begin to be aware of, how am I clinging? How am I resisting? How am I stuck holding on? And the moment you realize that, it's to relax. just to relax a little bit. You see, when you relax and take a deep breath, you expand. To relax and to realize it does not have to be this way. There are other ways that I can do this. There are other ways to show up. So we realize, we relax, and then we release. And this is the important part, is asking, what do I need to release here? What do I need to release? And allow that to be revealed to you. And what do I need to release? And in the releasing, you will come to discover that there's a greater part of you that is being released. Would you give me that song real quietly? I want to share a last true story with you. There's a true story that comes from India, that when the English moved to India and colonized and started their homes and businesses, they wanted recreation. And so the goal was to recreate something they had in England called golf. And so some of the English people in India went out and they created a beautiful golf course. And the day came when they finally began and could play their first game of golf. But something happened. There was something in India that they did not deal with in England, and that is called monkeys. So when they began to play golf, what happened was the monkeys would come down out of the trees, find their ball, and just throw it. Well, that was maddening to the golfer, because you can imagine, you hit it, it goes straight down the fairway, and this little monkey comes out of nowhere and grabs it and throws it in the water or throws it somewhere. Or maybe you have a hook or a slice and it went that way and the monkey threw it on the fairway. Well, that's not so bad. But it was totally destroying their game, the way they'd always played it. So they thought, no problem, we're going to build some walls. It took a long time to build a huge wall all around the golf course. Well, I don't know whose bright idea that was, because if you've ever noticed a monkey, one of their best skill sets happens to be climbing. That didn't work very long at all. They'd play, and it didn't take but just a few minutes before the monkeys were over the wall and going at it again. All right, so they tried their next step. The next step was, well, let's find something more appealing. So they would take big bunches of fresh bananas and put them away from the golf course, hoping that they could get them to go over and eat the bananas and distract them. But what could be more appealing than watching a human act crazy when the monkey took the ball? So still, the monkeys left the bananas and would go back to the golf course. So after reaching a point of being completely maddened by this, one person said, I think we need to surrender here and allow this game to be elevated. The game of golf in India is called play ball where the monkey drops it. And so they created a whole new game called play ball where the monkey drops it. And I love that story because have you had some really good breaks in your life? Raise your hand if you've had some good breaks. Have you had some really bad breaks? Life is like that. You're going to have some good breaks. You're going to have some bad breaks. It doesn't mean you don't try. It doesn't mean you don't master the understanding of who you are and learn to create circumstances as best you can. But when it's all said and done, we can't control everything. We're just part of a cause in a chain of causes and effect. And so life is asking you, play ball where the monkey drops it. And rather than trying to build walls, rather than trying to create distractions, it's about asking yourself, when I've hit this wall, when I've hit this, to ask inside, what am I being asked to surrender? And what is surrender seeking to bring forth in me? And that's the question I ask you, a couple of questions I ask you to consider this week. And so it's about recognizing when we're grasping. Relax a little, breathe, create some space. And then what am I being asked to let go of, to surrender? And what is this surrender bringing out in me? And so where in your life is it time to surrender anything that's holding you back? Is there any excuse or any that's just the way it is? Is it time to surrender that and up your game? And where would it be most freeing and empowering for you to let go and to practice enlightened surrendering? I want to lead us into a time of meditation where we can really anchor this. And we've chosen a song by Karen Drucker that says, I lay it down and I set it free. I lay it down, I set it free. I let my heart rest. I let it be. I lay it down. I set it free. I lay it down on the altar of love. Sing it with me. I lay it down. I set it free. I let my heart rest. I let it be. I lay it down. I set it free. I lay